brothers WISP. The brothers WISP, brothers WISP. The brothers WISP. The brothers.
You're now listening to Greg. It's the brothers WISP. Let's take a ride.
Hey everybody, it's Tommy with the brothers WISP. Today I have with me an old face that is starting to gray quite a bit. Over here is Tom Smyth. In Ireland, you guys have politicking and such going on from what you've been mentioning. Yeah, sorry. And then down here, I have Ole from our favorite country, Norway, kicking with us again. And then I'm down over here in Illinois, kicking along. So this is mostly going to be a kind of EU-centric podcast. I was just kind of wanting to talk about like what does the world look like outside of the United States. We talk about this the United States and kind of US-centric broadband a lot, and so I'm hoping to kind of just what does it look like? Are there small ISPs popping up? Are there is the political climate absolutely horrible? What makes it good? What makes it bad? How do you look and see? You're like, oh wow, I don't have to deal with that silliness in the United States, and then what ways are you guys like? Man, what sure would be nice if I had those cowboy values or whatever. So yeah, just kind of help guys get a perspective and some more ideas because we're a global community. Us internet service providers, there's not many of us, and we're a small group, so it helps to know, hey, what are the guys fighting with? Before we get to that, have to hit up the sponsors. The Brothers WISP is brought to you by Sonar, a scalable, intuitive, and comprehensive ISP billing and support system. Learn more at Sonar.Software. And then Tower Coverage is your RF propagation system to empower your network, real-time data metrics, enable your coverage area, reaching your customer base, and more. The industry's best RF propagation mapping system allows website and integration for customer sign-up and pre-qualification. Use this data to scientifically plan network expansion and help your WISP succeed. Get a free trial today at towercoverage.com. And I think, this is the updated one. Get a single pane of glass for your network with Preseam's trusted QoE solution. Using Active Queue Management, Preseam is a set it and forget it tool that lets you manage your network proactively without any complicated rules or geek knobs. With Preseam, you also get exclusive RF scores and analytics that show you the health of your network across all subscribers, access technologies, and vendors. Premium. Oh, nope, this isn't because they have one with their new fiber stuff. So sorry, Preseam. Copy and paste error. So Tom, I kind of had you give us a few points in the beginning, and you were mentioning that you guys you have some parliamentary shenanigans going on.
Yeah, so I'm sorry about the late podcast. I was meant to be here, and of course I scheduled it without considering that I might be called up. So as most of you know, I'm sometimes a political activist at home, and I think it's important to engage in civil society. And so the party that I kind of support, I volunteer. So today was the counting, and it's a manual counting process for parliamentary elections for European Union in Ireland and across many of the member states. So we were counting the votes that were cast yesterday, and also in Ireland we also have these local area networks, so it's like city councils, boroughs, that type of stuff. And so there was a lot of there's about 900 local representatives in Ireland being elected to councils at the moment, and then there's about 750 odd members of European Parliament, and of which and so each member state gets a certain allocation. So there's 27 member states. Ireland is one of them, one of the smaller ones. So obviously we've only 4.5 million people. So we have 14, I believe, seats in that 750 European Parliament. Okay. And so you have these national politicians, and then you have European politicians, and then you have you would have your national kind of parties. So obviously in the US, you'd have your Democrats and Republicans. And so your Democrats might be, what they might be called social Democrats, and then you might have your Republicans being Christian Democrats. So they'd be kind of, center left, center right, that type of scenario. I know some people on Fox News might call the Democrats hard left, but it's pretty much. I think it's the politics in the US is pretty much center right focused anyway. By default, look, it's a capitalist-driven economy.
Comparing to the world, yes, we would be a little bit center right.
Yeah,
argued, but.
And that's fine. And so you'd have that across the EU. You'd have a lot of centre right. So the largest party in the European Parliament currently, I believe, is the EPP, European People's Party, and that would be a centre right coalition. And of course, so the party that I supported is Fianna Fáil, which is actually the Gaelic for Warriors of Destiny. So there you go.
Wonderful for you guys.
They would have an association with a political group we call Alliance of Liberal Democrats in Europe, ALDE, part of Renew Europe. They're kind of a group. So each national parliament or party would then actually join a European kind of party, and they'd vote as a bloc and try and pursue European policies and try and control things in Europe. So if I was to loosely, because the European Union is quite unusual in that you have national sovereignty and then you have this pool sovereignty. So it's not like a federal system like in the United States. So what you actually have is a kind of a joint governance. So you have certain things are only for the national parliament. So for instance, spectrum policy are only controlled by the national government. Taxation, big one. Is only, and that's the reason why I suppose Ireland would have a fairly nice tax regime. I'm sure it upsets some of our good friends in Europe, but yeah.
It's one of the reasons why all the data centers are in Ireland.
Well, it's also because we have an exceptionally good power grid. Although I think we've opened the taps on that, and I think the lads want to build more data centers, and the grid operators are saying, that's enough, for now. And so obviously we're trying to build on more capacity. But yeah, there's a lot of, I would say that, yes. And I think also, to be honest, the cultural ties between Ireland and the United States has been very helpful to us. And of course,
it helps that you mostly speak English.
Absolutely. I think that helps too. And we're also good crack. But I think also what helps us well is that once you establish a company in Ireland, you could then have access to the internal market tariff-free. And that's that's the real benefit, So you have then about 450 odd million of a market, population of a market. So it's quite big. So anyway, I was basically counting votes, and what we do is kind of funny. You have all these political parties coming together, and they say, right, we want to find out how each street or each region voted. So we all actually work together. So you can imagine Democrats, Republicans, what's the other one? The Libertarians, everyone, and maybe even the Communist Party, if there's such a party exists. But if you can imagine all of us getting into a room and say, right, we all need to watch. So each box contains loads of letters, and the civil servants are behind a kind of a fence, and we can look at what they're counting. So it's very transparent.
Okay, so you were a ballot counter watcher.
Ballot watchers.
Okay, yeah, we have those in the States.
And then we're feeding it into a spreadsheet. So we actually would have almost like a street or a kind of borough. So if there was a townland, we'd have with a couple of hundred people. So we'd have where you'd have about 300 votes, and then we'd be able to say of those 300 votes in that box, so many voted for Fianna Fáil, so many voted for Republicans, so many voted for Democrats, and we all work together. And it's kind of funny because this guy from Labour, he's a madman, really cool guy. He just stands up with a chair and he goes, right guys, 10 o'clock last night, the polls closed. Party rivalry ended at that moment. Now we're all going to work together to find out how each box voted. And it's kind of a nice, transparent thing, but it's kind of funny here. all through the election, we were probably punching each other metaphorically. And then suddenly we're all working together. And people be saying, hey, I'm missing the spreadsheet. People are just sharing. It's actually really nice. And it's an example of, I suppose, how democracy, sometimes, I do reflect on the fact that we're a young enough country, just coming on around 100 years since our independence. And it's nice to see what people actually fought and died for, and it actually still working today. It's very positive. But yeah, so that's the reason why the podcast is late and it's dark. So thanks, Ollie, for
for coming in late.
And then we're segueing into the European policies, so the Commission is a permanent government in Europe. There's loads of civil servants. It's really well resourced, and their job is to push the EU forward. And they can start any type of legislation. They can start any type of initiative. But then each of the 27 member states, what we call the Council of Ministers, there's the European Council, and that's basically made up of all the member states. The heads of the member states are the ministers from the member states, and then they can say yes or no. So the member states can then collectively block them by what we call a qualified majority. And just to explain that, it's like you got 27 member states. Ireland has 4.5 million people, so 1% of the European Parliament, but we have one of 27 votes. So to stop all the little countries ganging up, and the likes of Germany and France, you have to have 60% of the European population represented in the states' votes, and you have to have a majority of the member states as well. So you can't have the big players can't dominate the little ones, and the little ones can't gang up on the big players.
Yeah, so it's similar to the United States, how we have our House and Senate. You can get it through the House by just sheer weight of California. And if California and Texas wanted to, they could basically get whatever they want done if they worked together. But in the Senate, they would have to work with other states to get things.
So you have your checks and balances, and then
so it's in the same pass.
And then the European Parliament can amend and obviously vote down the initiatives initiated by the Commission, approved by Council, and as one Commission official said, yes, what we put into what we propose to the Parliament is not necessarily what Parliament signs off on. It often takes on a life of its own, coming back from, because obviously the European Parliament can amend legislation and shape it. And so I suppose one thing I would say is that the EU and the EU Parliament is becoming increasingly more important for European lives. There's a lot more, and for good reason. They're trying to standardise some of the stuff, and a lot of the initiatives, like food safety and stuff like that, has been hugely successful. The agricultural policy, and obviously then we've got the internal market, which turned 30 about 2 years ago. Which is basically the internal market was a common market, but it was like very rules based. So funnily enough, we have these things where member states can pump taxpayer money into businesses. Really, by default, it's prohibited. And then they say, except for, and then there's a ton of exceptions. But the idea of it was that Germany couldn't subsidize the likes of Lufthansa against, let's say, Ireland's Ryanair. And the idea was that you don't have people wasting money on their national champions and have just fair competition. And it was to encourage member states that if you had a good industry in one member state, that it would export to other member states where, and obviously inevitably, if it's better at doing something like faster, better, cheaper, then it would obviously crush the competition. But that's just, capitalism at play. But the idea was that you don't waste taxpayers' money propping up crappy practices. That was the logic of it, and it has been hugely successful. Then obviously there's political carve-outs. So, for instance, broadband providers. If you're not providing broadband in an area, the market is failing, then the governments are entitled to intervene in that. So there will be state aid controls and stuff like that. And
so like in like the broadband market, there's rural areas that don't have large amounts of population that have that would naturally build up in an ISP, or like one of the major players. So actually, out of curiosity, like, are there like 4 or 5 major service providers across the EU, or is that like more dependent upon which state that you're in,
It's a very
which
good question.
country?
And in fact, it's one of the issues that Commissioner Breton, so just to give you a bit of context, Commissioner Breton, who's actually the Commissioner for the Internal Market, he's over the actual digital market as well. He wants to see 3 players, so Pepsi, Coke, and maybe Red Bull as your ISPs across the European Union, despite the fact that there's 27 member states. There's at least 15 languages, and I'm probably underestimating that. And so you have language and cultural boundaries and stuff like that. So obviously they want to increase the internal market and that cross-border trade.
So they're trying to have, like, across multiple states or across all states, you're going to have these major players competing.
Yeah,
Okay.
now, and in ways we do. Like, for instance, we have Iliad, which is based in France, which owns, let's say, Aircom, which is the national incumbent in Ireland, or at least was the national incumbent. You got Virgin Media or Liberty Global based out of Netherlands. You've Deutsche Telekom, you've got Telefonica in Spain. So you have, and then obviously Vodafone. So you have quite big players that are,
Okay.
multinational in the EU, but they're not necessarily the third. You do have a very much state-dependent system. Like, for instance, in Ireland, you'd have Eir, you have Vodafone, you have Three, which is Hutchison, and then you have Imagine, which is the largest fixed wireless provider. And then you have the likes of, basically about 30 small ISPs like ourselves. In the rest, others, and they're typically fixed wireless. And so that's the Irish market. And so,
what about Norway, Ole? What's the market up there look like?
It's a bit different in Norway since we are not part of the EU. We are part of the European Economic Agreement. Norway, Iceland, and Liechtenstein have free access to the EU market but we also have to implement all EU directives. What's happening in Norway is that the big players are buying up the little ones. So what we see is that those who are well funded, say run by electricity companies, they won't sell. But all the others, smaller providers, are bought out from the bigger ones. And I'd say there are about 3 big players in Norway. And strangely enough, the national broadband, or the old national telco, Telenor, isn't the biggest one. This is a private company called Lyse, and they have, I think, around 40% of the market, and Telenor a little bit lower, 35%, and then there.
So I guess if, say, somebody's in a rural town and he's wanting to, there's limited fiber connectivity, for whatever reason, internet connectivity isn't great at wherever he's at, and he's wanting to buy some DIA and resell that to his neighbors. What would that situation look like? Is there somewhat of a competitive landscape? Are those companies required to sell or offer these kinds of services, or is it kind of a just, if you're lucky and they have network engineers who want to sell that stuff and want broadband?
There are some differences here in Norway, I think, because all the counties and I think you can compare it to states have their own network to provide internet for schools, and it is possible to buy access from those. And since all schools are going to have fiber, there is a well built out network, so you can buy, but they are not exactly cheap.
Yeah, but
So
yeah,
and also if one of the bigger ISPs, especially Telenor, which has been the market leader on ADSL and stuff like that, they are grown by Lyse now, but they have to. They are required everywhere they build out, supported by government money. They get a period of time, say 12 months, that nobody else can sell access on their network, and then after 12 months they have to sell to other providers. So, for instance, say a 70 megabit line costs $70, and after the year is up, they have to sell it to a third-party provider for $30 per month, and then the third provider will get access.
okay.
And that's everywhere that they build out with government funds.
So kind of like an open access, or like there is. So actually, that's a question. In that situation, I've seen agreements that the EU does that and requires the reselling. Is that like open access where the other provider is like just utilizing the infrastructure to get to the customers, or are they just reselling the main provider's connectivity?
They are reselling. Telenor GPON is an example, and you will get an exchange point where and your own WLAN, and then you'll have to tie your management system into Telenor's system too.
Okay, so you aren't buying your own upstream connectivity and then feeding that in.
You could do that, but it's expensive.
Yeah. So actually, and what would a 1 gig DIA cost? I have my Microsoft calculator with the Norway krone pulled up. So what does that look like?
1 gig, I don't know. We have a 10 gig DIA, and we pay around, I'd say around $2,200 per month.
So
it all depends on how many providers there are.
2,200 krone?
Yeah. Dollar.
American dollars. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So you've already done the math for me. So that's 23,000 krone.
Yeah, ish. Around there. Yeah, ish.
Okay. All right. So that's in line with the American market in a lot of places, especially if it's still delivered outside of a data center. You can get is like Hurricane Electric or Cogent available up over that way?
Yeah.
Okay. So So what does the price for like 10 gig look like in Ireland, Tom?
So in the data center itself would be probably around just about $900 a month, I would say, in around that, including cross connect. But then obviously the cost of the data center, that doesn't get you to the local town. So ironically the most expensive part of our network, apart from wages, is the backhaul from our data center to the regions. And so we would have the open access model. So like what Ollie was saying there, there's two different ways it's treated in the European Union. So obviously like AT&T, most of the telecoms networks in Ireland or in Europe were built with state funding at one stage, and then they were privatized in the late 90s, early 90s. And then so it's built with public money effectively. And so as a legacy, they're considered significant market powers, or SMPs. And so then they're regulated. So because they're effectively a monopoly, or were effectively a monopoly, and so they're then subject to price, cost plus reasonable margin, that type of stuff, types pricing. They have to demonstrate it, to demonstrate the costs involved in, let's say, delivering the service, and make sure that they have a wholesale price that a retailer can sell. There are different options. You can white label the S&P's network. Or in our case, I think what Ollie was talking about is that you effectively use their last mile, mid-mile access, and you hand it off to a data center or data centers that you control. And then you buy your own IP transit and you have your own management systems and QoS, and you add your own value add, be it, private WANs, all that type of stuff. And that's let's say the legacy significant market power source type regulatory model. And then, if, for instance, someone wants to build out fiber or got funding for fiber rollout or even fixed wireless rollout and stuff like that, they would have had to have some sort of open access mechanism to allow for the resale. And the recent guidelines, which have been involved heavily with trying to shape them to improve them and address, I suppose, deficiencies that we might have experienced in Ireland, where because the whole thing about state aid is measure the problem, and then once you measure the problem, apply the medicine to solve the problem without what they call crowding out investment. So what they don't want to do is, as you can imagine, if the market is functioning, they don't want to put public money into building infrastructure that Vodafone, Air, or AT&T or Verizon would do anyway. So the whole idea is not to push them out of the market. And that's the technical term or legal term for crowding out. So the idea is that you say, well, if the market is achieving this type of performance and you measure it, you have to map it and say which part of the market. And anyone who doesn't have that type of, any premises that doesn't have that performance can have a state intervention subject to strict controls such as open access, like what Ollie was saying. And so, that's one thing I've been working with the European Commission and the Irish government. Well, I would say I was arguing with the Irish government, but working with the Commission to try and, I suppose, solve the problem for small guys. So, like in Ireland, we are quite unusual that we've about 50 fixed wireless operators, and we have had a massive intervention, €3 billion for a country of 4.5 million. It's actually the most expensive intervention in all of Europe it's 39% more expensive than the second most expensive, and it's about 300%, 3 times the price of the median for intervention per household. So we're paying the government is paying or has approval to pay up to 5,500 per premises pass to get them fibre done. And that's presently, overbuilding about 30 fixed wireless operators like myself. So that is a challenge on the basis that we can't deliver a fraction of what we can actually deliver, and we've tried to show the government, but they've ignored it. So there's an ongoing dispute about that. But it is don't get me wrong, fibre is great, and we all it's lovely to see investment. But I suppose the principle we would look at it is that if we've invested in infrastructure and it's been overbuilt unfairly, then it needs to be compensated. That'd be kind of, let's say, our position, the position that I'm taking on behalf of about 20 fixed wireless ISPs in Ireland. And what we're trying to do is just get a fair play on that. But yeah, so there's one of the things in Europe we see, in particular with this Commissioner Breton, this French commissioner, is he's ex-France Telecom. He is our Orange Telecom, so he has a view of the world, let's say, that's from the bigger telecoms provider point of view. And I would say it's been a little bit challenging in the last 5 years as a small ISP in Europe. And I think then coming up as a small ISP in Europe, I think it's going to be quite tough. In that it seems to me, or my impression is that a lot of the policy shifts in Europe have been about relaxing regulation on obligations on the bigger telecoms providers, and I suppose and putting smaller guys like ourselves at a disadvantage.
Yeah, and that's really unfortunate that you're getting, and it's happening in the United States. And to be fair, it just seems to be that's the way the political and social climate is people understand, know that, hey, fiber is going to give me, they think that fiber is going to give them the best experience. It's going to have the fastest speeds, the best reliability. There's fewer things that go goofy with it. So yeah, there's hundreds of ISPs that are having overbuilds.
Well,
All
absolutely.
right,
Yeah.
so and actually, out of curiosity, was there a standard that you have to be able to hit these speeds? So in the United States, for BEAD funding, you have to be able to hit 100 by 25 to prevent yourself from being overbuilt.
Yeah. So
it used to be just if you provided phone service was one of the minimal, little minimal thing. Phone service in like 10.1 back in those days. Gosh. And even then, people were like, "Oh, that's crazy. Nobody needs it." So, it's a whole conversation. Was there a standard in?
So there was this NGA standard, what called Next Generation Access Standards, and what it was defined in 2013 state aid guidelines, and they were enforced for about 10 years, and that was 30 megs down, 6 megs up. And high-speed broadband was defined as 10 or 100 megs down, and I forget what the upload was, but it was, probably 10 or 20 megs up. But that was, and then there was ultra fast. Then obviously was so now the new one is gigabit. There's a gigabit infrastructure, so it's like realistically you need to have a minimum of 100 megs down, and I forget the upload on that one, but that was just to clear it, right? But they could say if you got a survey that said that people wanted gigabit, then that could be construed as a market failure, and that the only way to avoid that would be if you had 2 or more players with about 300 megabits per second, if I recall correctly. So they were quite more prescriptive. What was interesting, you asked a really good question, and I'd just like to engage in it for a second because it's important, particularly in the Irish context, but also for lessons learned for small ISPs across Europe. You asked, was there a standard that we had to achieve? And one of the disputes I'd have with the government is that when we submitted our mapping data initially in 2015, they didn't tell us what standard we had to hit. So they told us, submit your data, and then they basically created a standard which just happened to exclude us all. And of course, then they got delays, and of course, our technologies moved on, where we were like, okay, well, we've, if you've Cambium equipment, EPMP on a 3000 even, you're hitting 250 megs to the subscriber. Okay, that's close in, but you're getting 100 megs pretty consistently far out. So we were 3 times that standard. But we would say that they moved the goalposts in the mapping process and excluded us for arbitrary reasons. And also those challenges around the length of time they gave us to actually submit data. And so then by not having complete data, they said, oh, well, you're not credible. And you're like, well, you never tested our network. So it was this type of kind of shenanigans, as we would call it, as for the want of a better word. We do think that the Irish authorities treated the fixed wireless sector quite disgracefully, actually.
It sounds like you guys have gotten the raw end of the stick. What about over in Norway? Is fixed wireless even a thing with all your trees and mountains?
No. We had a fixed wireless ISP locally, which my previous company helped run, but there were no upgrades. Fiber is built everywhere, so they just shut it down and went to delivering through mobile networks on 5G instead.
Okay. And then here's another question: is how successful have you guys utilized any of these open access networks that governments have funded, or have you seen other guys utilizing them being successful, or is it just not it's a good idea and it's nice that it's in the law, but it doesn't get implemented well?
My experience in Ireland is that it depends. I would say that the regulations, they tend that the SMPs will tend to deliver on the traditional regulatory thing. They tend to deliver to an SLA and not necessarily care about delivering the service. So, so if, they can send a guy out where they need three guys, and they'll say, "Oh, we had a look at the install, and going to need three people to do this." So, and then you have to. They say so they've responded to the initial one, and then you have to go. You have to make a new order asking for the three people. There's not that proactivity, and so people can use it and say, "Well, we're responding within the 4 hours," but you're having to constantly manage them to deliver the service eventually. And so that can be a challenge. And so the regulations tend to, they obviously they're ex ante or in front of it, but they try to predict what the behavior will be and try and correct it. And then obviously there's a loophole, and then suddenly they have to try and change the regulation to resolve that issue. And so you can have a challenging situation with, for instance, in the previous lives of like there was a small telecoms provider that wanted to try and build out its own infrastructure alongside the incumbent. And but the problem was the incumbent only put resources in place that would facilitate something like 60 porting of phone numbers a week, which of course totally undermined the business model of someone trying to, take in lots of lines and build up the business quicker. So there was, and actually that particular one failed. But in terms of open access networks in Ireland, I would say that generally, when they work, they're fine. I would say that the department in Ireland are trying to manage NBI. That's the national problem. That's the open access network. I would say for the amount of money they're getting, I would say that the service is not sufficient. That's my own opinion on it. I would certainly say that sometimes I feel like the technical support, they like to pick up the participation trophy as opposed to actually solve the problems, I suppose, but that said, in terms of open access, yes, they have regulatory obligations, and to be fair, they are being implemented. I suppose, and I suppose that's not. So the dispute with the government is not with the company that's building out the network. They're just what I would call very lucky feckers that are overbuilding my network with €3 billion of public money. It's a great deal for them. Like they've got 95% state aid funding, and they get 100% ownership of the asset. It's a sweet deal.
It is that is extremely crazy. What about Ole? What about up north?
Well, since there are only the big ISPs who are probably getting anything done with the build-outs where they are forced to sell access. There is one ISP in Norway which are, I'd say, mostly based on selling third-party access from Telenor. So they are selling cheaper lines than the competitor, making less money, but they probably have such a volume that they make money anyway. So the issue with doing that is that you have no control over, like Tom said, you have no control over what if a backhoe cuts the fiber or the neighbor shoots a crow and stuff happens. So and then who's going to go out and fix it? It's the eternal. Yeah, and they answer the phone within 4 hours, and then the guy who can do it is available next week. There is a lack of ISP technicians here in Norway. I see ads all the time. So if any Americans want to come over and start working, feel free.
But it's an interesting point you raised there, Ali. Like one of the things I would say with fixed wireless is like like our typical resolution time, even after a storm, and like usually, it's individual houses. Like obviously, we build out the towers to try and withstand, obviously, and large like windage and all that type of stuff, wind loads. But what we find is that with the fiber, which is pole,
All
slung across
aerial.
poles, like for instance, one of the statistics from one of the providers in Ireland, one of the newer providers in Ireland that do open access, like they were saying resolution of 90% of their faults within 2 weeks. So they had to actually say 90% within 2 weeks. While the other, typically your SLA would be that you'd need to have, I think it's 85% or 90% within 3 days. So, that meant that, there was a lot of people, a
Down
significant
for
portion of
a
people
long period
waiting
of
two
time.
weeks to get a fix on their fiber. While, in fixed wireless stuff, like we'd be talking about, if after a major storm event, weather event, blizzard or something like that, we're talking about hours slash, 1 to 2 days to get,
Yeah, I've had people go weeks or months, but that's because their stuff went offline. We called them and they never responded. But that's not our fault.
oh no,
But
like,
yeah, yeah, yeah. But like somebody calls in and says, "Hey, this is a problem." That's crazy. Now, admittedly, so the company I work for, we do DSL through phone lines with a local company called Frontier. And yeah, you can easily have multi-week stuff because Frontier, yeah, they have legal SLAs that they have to follow, but they can follow every single one of them to the very maximum. And that gets to be days and weeks of like just twiddling your thumbs, nothing you can do about it.
particularly like when you have a technician who's using, I would say sometimes it's not exactly best effort. Like I remember one of my pet peeves recently was I said, you should tell me the MAC address list on my NNI that you're seeing, right? And this was one of the first connections we had on it. And they didn't even check to see was the MAC address of the end device, the access circuit actually coming through on the NNI. You'd be thinking, okay, guys, I've looked at this and it's blatantly obvious. MAC address that you're telling me I have in the access is not in the NNI. That would lead me to believe that it's your problem. And but again, participation trophies. We're not exactly
Yeah.
trying to win, and it's frustrating. But like, I would say that the fiber side of things, I think fixed wireless obviously has been growing in America quite considerably recently, even with fiber rollout. And the way I would look at it is that fixed wireless, if it's done right, when it's done right, which a lot of we would do and a lot of our colleagues would do right, is does provide a good service and a good reliable service. And like we carried like it's funny, like the politicians in Ireland would have said, "Oh, thank God for the national broadband plan." We'd have been fucked without it for COVID. And then you go, yeah, but they never connected anyone before, with the first lockdown and the second lockdown. We were the ones carrying it. But yeah, it was a market failure. So that was a bit of a frustration for us. But yeah, so we would see that there is this heavy focus in Europe for gigabit rollout, which is, very positive and all that. But what we're seeing is that maybe the market players, the measurement of the market failure is contentious. I think it's improved a lot with the new guidelines. It's a lot fairer. At least it looks like they tightened up a lot of the wiggle room that maybe member states could have to try and intervene and fail providers unfairly. Like I think the vast majority of the fixed wireless. Like the funny thing is, the Irish government basically went to Europe and said there's not one person in Ireland served by any fixed wireless provider is capable of getting 30 megabits. Therefore, we must intervene. That was basically what they said. So they failed all of our networks, regardless, even not even taking in a smaller footprint or anything like that. It's really not a fair thing to do, but that's what they did. And but look, we're engaging with the relevant authorities to deal with that. And hope we get a resolution.
So, all right, and then that's pretty rough, and definitely is why we Americans ISPs need to pay attention, because the same thing can happen to you. Your money, your taxes can go to overbuilding you, which is never fun to see or hear about.
Here in Norway, there is if you are receiving government funds, if you deliver speeds below 100 megabit, but you can deliver up to a gigabit, they can deny your application.
So if
So
you have like a minimum package that's like, oh, this is just for
yeah,
your security cameras or whatever.
yeah, you got to deliver 100 meg minimum, and also they want 1 gig minimum download, but the upload is unspecified, which I think is due to pressure from the DOCSIS guys.
Well, yeah, and DOCSIS 4 is supposed to have a lot more bandwidth available to it.
Yeah,
But
Yeah.
shucks, yeah,
expensive.
yeah, very expensive. I actually just got to meet a guy who handles DOCSIS systems, and he's a good guy, listener of the podcast. But it's just like, man, what do you? That's Yeah, that's why they don't have upload limits, or why they want, because
Yeah.
the DOCSIS 3 has terrible asymmetry.
A gig down, and what they sell 30 megs up. I think X only on a gig will probably
Yeah,
fill the 30 megabit.
very much so. Yeah, so I had
Not far away.
I had coax DOCSIS at my old house, and I only paid for like 600, 700 download, because I was like, the upload is what I kind of actually cared about, and once you're above a few hundred meg, it barely makes much of a difference in
Yeah.
my experience. But yeah, so yeah, the upload speeds just was never like, I think at most I ever saw was like 25 meg upload. And I was just like, God, and it was choking pretty hard. It's like, man, what the heck? This is terrible. So so are there like substantial cable networks? So like in the United States, every single household that was built, from 1910, 1800s even, to my babe's sometime in the last decade, has telephone lines run to it, because that the government was huge on phone lines. They have phone lines run inside of them, so DSL is an extremely pervasive technology in the United States, even though it's very rapidly dying. Is that similar there? Do you guys have phone lines run everywhere, or is it more of a, you've had, you came in a little bit later and you had DOCSIS systems or something else like that?
In Ireland, we've a lot of twisted pair telephone systems. Then obviously I would say 70s and 80s, there was a lot of cable systems in urban areas. But in terms of rural, we had a lot of the twisted pair. So we've had, let's say, the VDSL with vectoring, which gives about, I suppose, 125 down, 25 up, within 50 meters of the exchange, and then and then it drops off, and then
Very
so
rapidly.
probably around 2.5 kilometers of cable gets you down to about 30 megs. So that was the NGA cutoff actually for the modeling for the fixed wire, or for the fixed infrastructure. They said if you're radial distance plus, let's say, some statistical factor, and if I remember correctly, it was like 1.4 in the cities or 1.6. So if you were you'd have to multiply the radial distance times 1.6 in the cities to get the actual length of the copper conductor for the statistical analysis, or 1.2 in the countryside. So if you're a kilometer radial distance from, just to explain what I mean by that, is if you're a kilometer radial distance from the local cab, it was expected that you would have run through about 1.2 kilometers of cable to get to that cap. So that was
in the wired world, we can't just go a straight line from point A to point B. like
not
like
cool
you
if
wireless
people can,
Yeah, fixed wireless. You just go straight. You point at where you're going, and you're done.
Absolutely. And like,
Uh,
look, so I would say that the main one was twisted pair and coax. So then there was a fair bit of fixed wireless. I would say probably like Imagine will be the largest one, but they've also said publicly that they've had challenges with their business model with the overbuild of their infrastructure. Like they invested, I'm going to say about 120 million back in 2018. There were, Brookfield Asset Management invested in them, and then there was a 45 million equity injection in there in the last couple of years. And so they've actually had advertisements. Sorry, they've had like members of parliament ask questions about how can the impact to their business, like, because obviously if they have 47,000 customers connected, and if their ability to fund and operate their network is being undermined by people just moving to fiber, it could cause a problem where you have a disruption of service for the rest of the customers. And I think it's a concern for all the fixed wireless ISPs. I mean, it's something that we have to keep an eye on because obviously, as you lose customers, you still have the same cost. But, so you build up your infrastructure and cost base to accommodate. Like the way we've done it is a demand-based investment fund. And so that is a concern that the fixed wireless operators have in Ireland presently as well.
yeah, because at a certain point, it's going to be unsustainable for you to operate your business, and the 60% of customers that you have that aren't on the fiber and don't have fiber built out to them, you can't afford to continue delivering service to them. So when you close your doors, they're SOL till fiber is actually built out to them.
Yeah.
So yeah, that is a huge frustration. I can totally feel and understand that. Do either of you know much about like other countries in the EU? What does this look like? Spain, France, well, I mean, the UK. Actually, you're closer to the UK. Admittedly, they aren't EU anymore, but they're still Europe.
So UK would have a fair telephone system net, but they also have urban. So they would have had a fairly large BT, British Telecom, would have been very much twisted pair. They would have a huge twisted pair infrastructure, VDSL based. They have been rolling out fiber, and they also do have a lot of cable operators. I think Telefonica in Spain have been very successful in investing in fiber. So you've not every fixed network or not every telecoms provider was created equal, as you're well aware. And probably BT have been pretty good at dominating in the UK. So, like for instance, if any small operator like us set up, they would typically, they'd be very aggressive in the price in that area to effectively snuff out any competition. While in Ireland, I think we were lucky enough that there was underinvestment in telecoms for a long time by the incumbent, and it allowed people like us to I suppose, get breathing room to just grow organically. That's why, we've maybe just around 3,000 subscribers ourselves. We're a small company, but like, and we're probably the mid tier of small companies, if you know what I mean, upper mid. But that, and so that's shared, I think, quite a bit in Eastern Europe as well. Deutsche Telekom didn't quite invest in the same amount of fiber as the rest of the European Union, as far as I know. They also have the worst peering policy on the internet as well, just a friendly mention. But yeah, like I think Telefonica have been quite good. Vodafone have invested quite a bit as well in fiber. They've also partnered with the electrical utility company in Ireland. Styro is the joint venture, and so they wrap fiber around on the power lines and deliver the utility that way, or deliver the fiber that way. But it's interesting as well because you see with the way that network is built, the electrical utility say the utility is electrical. The infrastructure is for delivery of electricity first and foremost, and the fiber is very much secondary. Now so it just means that when you're trying to connect, you actually have to wait for certain technicians to come on. Sorry. So from that point of view, so that would be the kind of key, I suppose, the key thing that there is a fair bit of fiber investment in the EU, and they're trying to improve it. It's called the Gigabit Infrastructure Act. They're trying to encourage public bodies to make their buildings accessible for 5G rollout in major transport corridors and stuff like that. And that's one thing that small ISPs have to be concerned about. While it's very good, obviously, the fiber rollout and encouraging fiber rollout and encouraging 5G, but if you're a fixed wireless provider and you're in the middle, right? So you're neither gigabit nor you're not 5G. So you have your expensive customers getting the fiber, and then you have the low cost people getting the 5G subsidized network. And then you're squeezed in the middle. So the lower end of your market has been taken by low cost 5G because they're not having to obviously repay all the towers and stuff like that. And then you have the upper end of the market being taken by the fiber. And so you can be in the unfortunate middle where there can be quite a bit of carnage. So it's just something to, I suppose, keep an eye on, that to make sure that if you have the capability to deliver over 100 megs, and also you've competitors that can deliver 100 megs, that you submit your data to the relevant authorities. And if there are plans to overbuild you, to liaise with the EU. I would say one thing about the Commission. If you are liaising with the Commission, they will listen to you. And particularly if you obviously have an obligation to act in good faith and tell them the truth. And that is key. But the reality is, if you do engage early and often, you reduce the risk of being overbuilt. And if I could say about learning from the lesson from Ireland, is that engagement early, notifying because the member states are meant to tell the Commission the truth. Okay, I'm not going to say that I would have a huge level of confidence that always happens, but in law, that's what happens. That's why there's this duty of sincere and loyal cooperation. So the Commission generally will accept what the member states say. So if you know something to be different to that, then you should really notify the Commission as soon as you can. And that's one thing I would encourage people to do, particularly if there is a program being rolled out. Because I would say, as a small ISP, my gut instinct on it all is that these are to benefit the bigger players, and that maybe now, in fairness to the Commission and in fairness to the European Union, they always say, look, maybe you should right size the intervention so that smaller players can participate. But I think there is a significant bias in member states to go for the bigger guys because you're dealing with one guy instead of 50, that kind of way.
Yeah, and it's simpler, it's more straightforward. It's who, honestly, most of those politicians are probably going to have, because the big players are going to be in the big cities, which is where the politicians are. It's a natural thing to occur, and honestly, this is a niche industry. This is a niche, world that we live in. So that people make mistakes in it. Shucks, we've been making guns for hundreds of years, and we still have all this debate. Not to bring that as an argument, but there's a very, very much a technical world that we live in that normal people don't interact with, and politicians even less so. So maybe going back a little bit. You've been talking. You've talked a lot about kind of various different initiatives and programs going on in the EU. The Gigabit initiative and such. You in the notes here, you were mentioning there's a new European white paper on how to master Europe's digital infrastructure needs. What is this going on?
So this is kind of following on from an exploratory consultation that happened last year where they were saying, is network fees a good idea? And so they're reigniting the net neutrality debate for the third time or the fourth time, I don't know, but it keeps coming back. Our position has been that we think that I think the bigger telecoms providers have taken advantage, full advantage of the fact that the current commissioner for the internal market is a former CEO of a telecoms provider. And so I'm not saying that he's doing anything wrong, just to be clear, but I think his view of the world is informed by that experience and that viewpoint, which is, I would say, bluntly speaking, that some telecoms providers feel they have a divine right to a piece of the action of every piece of economic activity that arises out of the telephone lines that they provide to you. And I suppose the network fees debate has been, for me as a small ISP provider, there's a couple of problems. What we have is certain policymakers, politicians saying you should drive down the cost of the subscription per consumer or make it fair, reasonable, right? They're saying, okay, we'll do that. But then they're saying, but now we want Google, Microsoft, and all these big companies to pay because they generate so much content. And I think it's a perversion. It perverts the market because there's a couple of issues. One, if I'm connecting someone to the internet, my job is to connect them to whatever other user on the internet, be it a website or a telephone conversation or whatever. My job is to provide high quality access and manage the interconnections
to as much of the internet as possible.
Yeah,
and as is reasonable. You can't do gigabit to Japan all the time. You aren't going to build that infrastructure.
I know, but having said that, if a customer says I need that, and then I'm going, well, okay, or enough customers need it, then I go, well, I'll have a competitive advantage if I can make sure I have a clean pipe between me and Japan, and that's but the other side of that is the consumers need to pay for that, and I think that's a very reasonable proposition. That ISPs should charge a subscription model based on cost plus reasonable margin. And it's very transparent then, because if Tommy, if you move into our area and you say, right, well, I can sell broadband, and then you have this sweet deal with, well, that the bigger content providers are going to pay you for access to your customers, but I don't have that because I'm smaller than you. Then that creates a distortion in the market, and that's something that I've been deeply concerned about, because what I am seeing a lot from Commissioner Breton is a very telecom-centered view of the world, and I don't, and particularly when you're talking about things like we need 3 champions across Europe, and get the full harness. And one of the issues that people can talk about efficient investment of infrastructure. That's where you have just a handful of players, or everyone shares the infrastructure. You build one part of the infrastructure, I build the other part, and is somehow managed by the government, or some are regulated. The problem I see with all that is that you have this inefficiency of, if you have multiple companies competing with independent infrastructures, the actual inefficiency is paid for by the actual investors. It's not paid for, you know what I mean? There's no real harm to the consumers by 3 people building out gigabit fiber overbuilding each other, if you get me, if they're actively competing against each other. And what we'd be saying is, look, you should just simply transparently charge the customer what it is. But this thing of saying, well, we're going to give you a gigabit internet and we're going to do it for €15 a month, or $15 or $16 a month, that's just ridiculous. I mean, you can't sustain that. So what we have is telecoms providers in Europe driving down the cost, trying to get market share, and then saying, oh, well, we can't afford to actually provide people with the bandwidth that we promised them because of our business model. And then what they want to do is say, oh, EU, make Google, Netflix, Amazon, whoever, pay us for access to our customers. So they want to be paid twice. because they didn't charge the customer what they should have charged for the service. So you're
Yeah, and then
overpriced.
later on down the way, they'll raise the price to the consumers. And
Absolutely.
it's a cycle. We've seen it all before, and it's a problem. Is that the same up in Norway? Are there net neutrality issues popping up in Norway, or are you guys small enough that maybe that's not such a situation?
No, I mean, there are just a few internet exchanges in Norway, so we have to send traffic to Oslo, which is 1,000 miles. Yeah, 1,000 miles away. So we have 20 milliseconds added to anything that needs to come back. So some of our customers send traffic from us down to Oslo through their provider, or so we are 20 miles in away from each other, but we have 40 milliseconds of ping time between locations. So it's a bit hard. I'd like to say though that the DIA we use allows us access to their cache. So we have a Google cache in the nearest city 100 miles away, and also a Netflix cache in Trondheim, which is 15 milliseconds away. So
Yeah.
it's not too bad.
Yeah.
And that's,
So
sorry.
well, so yeah. So there's not. So what I'm understanding is there's not a lot of network interconnectivity in Norway. Like there's not a lot of peering. Is that just because people don't want to? Is that because of technical limitations? People don't know the benefits of it,
Oh,
or
they know. Of
they
course
just
they
don't.
know. Well, it complicates the network. So do you want an exchange point here? How much traffic is going? We have enough capacity. I think that's the way they look at it. We have an internet exchange in our nearest town, which is 1 gigabit lines, and that's the local health net provider for the Norwegian government, and the school and county provider, and they have a gigabit exchange point in Tromsø, which we can tap into, but then we'd have to lease a line there, and then so
yeah, and yet the cost, the amount of bandwidth going in between customers is honestly just not a lot. Maybe as IPv actually here's another question. IPv6 deployment. What does that look like in Ireland, Norway? You were just talking about asking about Dawson's own IPv6.
If I can pause if I could pause the IPv6 question just to engage on the internet work one, internet exchange, because I do think that's a phenomenal part of the internet ecosystem, and it's something that needs to be promoted. Because from a European policy perspective, if you look at it like it's a technical solution to a technical problem of content delivery or high bandwidth delivery, but also low latency delivery. Is like what I was quite curious about. Ollie was he was talking about latency, he wasn't talking about bandwidth. Like Ireland would be, let's say, not as long as Norway, but let's say our main internet exchange is in Dublin. There's two different infrastructures there, and all the content providers interconnect with that. Like I can tell you that I remember, Jesus, 3 or 4 years ago, Apple joined the exchange, and overnight, like literally, they flipped it on, and it was 200 gigs going into the exchange just by them turning it on and moving their Apple updates from wherever it was on the internet to that. And the thing about that is that internet connectivity was about a third of the cost for us. That cost because we built out our infrastructure there, and also we're quite fortunate because you think about it, we're only like 3,000 subscribers connected, so we're tiny. So is Apple or Google going to build out an infrastructure for that? No, but if you aggregate 50 of us into a building, hell yeah, they're going to build out to that. And I think that cooperative model where you actually exchange traffic freely, and in fairness, all the ISPs bar one exchange traffic freely, and including, and to be fair, the incumbent air exchange traffic freely with other providers. So, like a lot of the telcos are actually quite responsible, on the peering front in Ireland, and certainly there are two exceptions. One based out of Netherlands, I won't mention any names. One based out in Germany, which is absolutely infamous for making people go the long way around into their network. But and that's something that I think needs to be really tackled, is this type of long haul and stuff around.
So I give me some examples of like what that awfulness is. Like, so you're trying to achieve something, and what are the hurdles that I think you said it was Deutsche Telekom?
Deutsche Telekom will be infamous in Germany, and there's been massive outages because of this, where they'd force people to use a particular node or something like that. So you can imagine with BGP, you can use policy routing like anyone else, and you can prefer or de-prefer routes, and that's part of normal internet traffic management. And those tools are vital for internet ISPs to be able to manipulate traffic to ensure that you don't, like, for instance, here's an example. If I have 100 gigs between Dublin and Boston, let's say, and then Boston and Amsterdam, and I've only 10 gigs between Dublin and Amsterdam, if I go over 8 gigs to Amsterdam, I need to route it via Boston because I have more capacity that way, but it sucks on the latency. And that would be a legitimate traffic engineering decision that would suck, from a latency perspective. But you'd be doing it to avoid packet loss, and you'd be doing it. Now, that's fine, but there is a situation where you might say, well, I just keep that 8 gigs between Dublin or that 10 gig circuit between Dublin and Amsterdam, even though I ought to, if you were trying to do it efficiently, you might say, actually, I need to upgrade that 10 gigs to 100 gigs. And that's where you get these question marks about, what I would call sensible traffic engineering or traffic management or demand-based investment. So if the demand is on a particular route, you should really be investing in that route because there's a lot of demand for it as part of a normal traffic management process. And I think Deutsche Telekom have, along with others, have used that, and it has caused problems where they force people into a particular node, and rather than peering across multiple exchanges, you're having to transit into their network via another transit provider. And if there's congestion or there's a fault on that, then it can lead to a really bad result for both their customers. And here's the ironic thing. I don't know how some ISPs can sell a gigabit bandwidth, and they say, well, it's only gigabit bandwidth if someone pays me on the other side. And so the way they would do it is they would say, oh, no, our network is fine, but you need to buy internet access. It looks like your broadband provider isn't good enough. And what you can do is you can buy direct internet access from us, but really you're not actually buying direct internet access. You're buying access to their network in their customer base, which is a bit disingenuous, because what you're saying is, what you're basically saying is, I'm going to apply a tax to, like, if you were my customer, and
so they're only selling gigabit in between their customers, and they have terrible transit that they're buying from everywhere else.
And their own customers are actually suffering from that policy as well. And that's something that I do think needs to be cleaned up.
And that's a problem that how much transit do you need to buy to make everyone happy? It's that's a how long is a string question.
It is, but it's also part of the demand-based management. While if you actually use internet exchanges where everyone's building out their infrastructure, you can actually get a kind of an efficient investment for everyone. What I would personally object to is we've both built out quite a bit of an infrastructure to a point where we're 2 ports on a switch, and we refuse to route it on a policy basis, even though we have the capacity to do it. That I find objectionable, and that shite needs to be cut out, really. And it is bullshit. Sorry, pardon my French, but I think
So then it's always we all have run into these situations, and it's good to hear that it's the same all over. in that regard. Oli, so like, how does like where is most of I'm presuming that you guys actually both, but Oli, I'll go for you. What are your big users of bandwidth? How much, what is your average customer bandwidth? Look, actually, how big is your ISP that you're working for?
We are around 1,500
Okay.
endpoints.
So
So
then
half of small.
half of small.
Yeah.
Well, that's the biggest as I've ever really worked for besides consulting. So don't feel bad. So like, what is your average consumer? So in the United States, we're very rapidly growing to, for a long time, it was like 1.5 to 3. And then for 3, it was pretty solid for a few years there. And then very recently, I've been seeing more and more people saying, "Oh, I'm seeing higher." And I even in my own looking at ISPs and customers, we're getting closer and closer to 5 megabits per second here in the United States at peak time utilization, averaged across Tom, you're indicating yes. Oli, is that your experience as well?
Yeah, it's been increasing slowly, but that's because we are selling bigger subscriptions. So we're around 4.5 megabyte per second per
Really?
subscriber during peak time. So
what kind of plans are you selling?
allows this 30 megabits, and then we go up to 500 symmetric.
Okay. Tom, what about you? What are your speeds?
So it'll be about 3 to 4, I think, is let's say on the fixed wireless space. And that's one of the interesting things if you think about it. Like the whole targets for gigabit and 100 megs minimum. When you actually look at it, that when you have fiber and unrestricted access, so we don't. Just to be clear, when about 10 years ago, when the incumbents started, they used to have like tariffs for like 30 megs, 50 megs, 100 megs. And then they just said, okay, whatever the technology supports, we're going to deliver it. And I said, okay, if that's what I'm going to have to compete against, I said to set a target internally on our network. I said, right, let's try this. And so if you're within a couple of kilometers from our base station, you can get 250 megs, you get day at it. But there's actually an inherent advantage of that, because if you're downloading like Fortnite or an update or something like that, you get on, you download it, and then you get off, and you're not having to just regulate people at 60 kilometers an hour on a motorway that's 6 lanes. You're actually saying, right, you can just shoot through and you're gone, and the next person come in.
Okay.
And that's worked quite well for us. And it's something that I would actually, if you have the capacity, like, look, I'm lucky that I suppose my network is small. Like, I mean, we're across maybe 6 counties, so it's a few hundred square miles of coverage area, and it's, I suppose the length of our network will be maybe 100 miles long, and then maybe 40 miles wide, that type of direction,
Mm-hmm.
and obviously
Yeah,
hills and environmental things.
It makes it different. Yeah, so I've seen several providers do that. Where I work for DSL, whatever the technology can do, we'll deliver that. On the fiber side, we do break it out in speeds because there's a lot more room to work in speed on the fiber side, in my opinion. On the wireless side, I feel like it's beneficial to do speeds. One, because then you can kind of customize the plans to what your customers' needs are. And then 2, you're going to get more money out of customers who want more performance. And 3, the other thing is I'm presuming you have very strict rules about what your wireless CPE, like what kind of connection they have back to your base stations.
Yeah.
Because if you have go as fast as the technology can handle, and you utilize that, then you're going to eat up a lot of airtime if you have bad CPEs. Whereas if you're limiting, yes, it's this customer's a terrible customer, but they're only a couple megabits per second. I can handle that. Yes, I'm eating lots of airtime to deliver minimal amounts of speeds to them, but it's not all of my airtime all the time.
Well, I think polling-based systems like EPMP or PMP, let's say they're the ones I'm familiar with. And I use the lower cost. I use the EPMP side because the polling mechanism, the airtime. If you have a socket connection that I haven't really seen the impact. Well, also we do say to the guys, if you don't have line of sight to the base station, we don't connect the customer. And the simple reason is the impact was just too much earlier on when we were using the technology. And that also the customer's not happy. And you don't, like, one unhappy customer tells 20 people that you're not great. And we learned that early on. Like we're 18 years in operation this year. And really, we don't want to have that stigma, So it was literally like, if you can see it and you're, good clear line of sight, and you're within, good signal range, with polling. I think polling is key. I think, that TDMA type polling. And that also allows you to equalize so that if you do have multiple customers coming on stream, the scheduling in the actual base station itself deals with that. And then also when you're aggregating into the likes of VPP, it's inherently a polling algorithm. So it's actually very good at equalizing the bandwidth. Just when you're actually aggregating the traffic into. So obviously, you were mentioning IPv6, which I promise you I'll get back to, but if you have, IPv4 is scarce. So what we do is a layer 2 overlay on a routed OSPF based network. So we're tunneling down to our base station with VXLAN, and then but those are coming back into a VPP concentrator. And it's that's implemented in polling. So you're polling between the base stations, and you're polling, and obviously that only really impacts the customer when there's contention. But generally, we try to keep everything under 80% utilization anyway. And when we do, we just add in another 10 gig into the lag, and we're link aggregation group, we're fine. And then obviously in a base station, it's subsectoring, so we tend to, on the EPMP stuff with those types of tariffs, it's under 31 customers for the EPMP 3000, I think is, for NGA. And obviously that pull back. So if you have a load of gamers in the same sector, you just have to subsector.
You have to break it out, and you take the loss where it happens.
But that's, when you think about it like that, once you have the customers and you have, that you have a full sector, it's a nice problem to have. Just say, I just have to put it. And you have you're keeping the customers happy.
Well, and also with the PMP, unlike Tirana, you can subsector it, and it's not going to break the bank.
Yeah.
Are there any Tirana provide? Ole, you were saying there's not a lot of wireless guys. What about in Ireland? Is Tirana at all a player up that way?
I'm not aware of it, because the vast majority of the small, you see, the more licensed gear for a long time was, your WiMAX, so Bessemer for years, and all of those and people who stuck exclusively on the license spectrum have actually kind of moved on and actually have replaced it with likes of license exempt stuff from EPP or PMP, the ones that I'm aware of anyway, or they use Radwin, which is an Israeli firm, and then they would have, and use license exempt spectrum from there. But we would say that the biggest ISPs, the biggest small ISPs, would tend to use either Cambium is predominantly, I think, and then Ubiquity would probably be the close second. MikroTik is there for
because there's crazy guys out there.
There's, but I think Imagine would use all sorts of LTE based systems, so it'd be. But I'm not too sure if they use Tirana. I think they. I think at one stage they were using Huawei. They're certainly using other they do keep. I know that they do use some cambium as well there. I'm aware of that, but I don't know how
Out of
much.
Yeah, out of curiosity, so like in our portion of Illinois, United States, about $55 a month is like the about your gold and your higher end for residential customers that they want to spend. What is it for Ireland across
Our
the
top
EU?
package would be €57, and that would be like 100, 100 meg
Okay,
plus. But we basically it's unrestricted. Then we do have a lower cost package, which privately I would say there's no real difference. It's kind of the thing is that what we say to people is, look, with a 100 meg package, obviously we're obligated to give you at least 100 meg, or try and and keep you happy. And so if someone says, "Oh, I'm only getting 50 megs," we say, "Well, you can upgrade," and that obviously helps finance like subsectoring and stuff like that. So it's basically 37.45 and 57, I think, is ours. That's
okay.
our price of our equipment.
Yeah,
Or
the
sorry, our
euro is
monthly
is pretty close to the dollar
into
right now.
dollars at the moment. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So
so you're about $40, $50 somewhere in
yeah,
there. Yeah.
yeah, and that's and it has been successful, and it has allowed us to invest in the infrastructure, and we are holding our own against fiber. So, obviously you have people selling fiber at €24 a month, €25 a month, and that can be challenging, to compete
Yeah,
against.
hey, a lot of guys are gulping it, but I've competed against fiber, and that was with Ubiquiti NSM5 gear. So, and we were picking up customers left and right off of them. So,
Well, yeah,
it's all about how well you manage your network, and
absolutely.
what's the customer experience look like.
And I
Um,
think I
what
think
what about you, Oli? Down up north, what does that look like?
Well, up here, our biggest competitor, which is the national telco, Telenor, for the cheapest line, they charge $70, and
70 American dollars
yeah,
ish.
and you'll get a
Okay.
100 megabit line, and we are a bit below that. So our cheapest one is $40, and then you add $10, and we'll upgrade you one speed notch from 30, 60, 100, 200, 500.
Okay. I
And
mean, that's
if you are not a residential customer, we can also do a point to point for 10 gig for you, if should you desire, but you will have to pay.
yeah, yeah, always have to pay when
Yeah,
you're a business.
yeah.
Okay. So that's
And
okay, pretty
we
wild.
don't see what we observe on the graphs are spikes for when the customers with high bandwidth usage, like Steam updates, and you notice 500 megabit usage for 3, 4, 5, 10 minutes, and then it's done. And so it basically doesn't affect the overall experience for the other client. So if you want to pay more for faster internet, please be my guest.
Yeah. No, and that was kind of that was actually something I wanted to roll back. Is you were saying as you were selling higher speeds, you'd seen a little bit higher. I when with wireless for a while, our maximum speed was at 8 megabits per second down, and this was 4 or 5 years ago. So and I was like, this is ridiculous. This is crazy. And but I, arguing in the company, like, hey, we need to go faster. We need, Starlink's going to be a thing, all these other things. And when I just went in because I had the ability to, and I just upped all these customers' plans to effectively unlimited. And I'd been graphing what their usages was for a couple months ahead of time, and then 2 months afterwards, I came to my bosses and I was like, hey, this is the graph from before. This is the graph of after. You want to know what I did in the middle point here? I unlimited speed for everybody. I turned it all off, and it ran like this for months. No, you know what we didn't have? People complaining about speeds. you know how much more bandwidth we use? We jumped from like 1.5 to like in the 3-ish realm. But and then at that point we were starting to build fiber backhaul infrastructure across everything. So it's like, you know, we have this bandwidth, we need to sell it. So yeah, I didn't see as much jump, really going from the small plants to little bit higher plants. I did not see a huge jump. But yeah, it's crazy how that goes. Rolling back again, Tom, let's hit up IPv6. What is that deployment looking like?
So it's one of the things that I think needs a bit more focus from a European perspective. Like they're talking about this white paper about digital connectivity and how to do it and sometimes it's create new standards for the sake of it rather than just utilize the existing standard and technologies that engineers have come up with to interoperate. And so I say IPv6 is probably not promoted enough by the European Union itself and by member states. That said, as an CTO and CEO, you know, because I'm a small ISP too, you know, so I have to wear both hats. And when I went to the chief financial officer and said, okay, we're going to do IPv6 and, you know, we need to invest in CPEs, do stuff. And he's going, what will it give me? And I went, well, it's kind of like running another ISP without an additional revenue stream. You have to train up all your staff on this new technology. And now it needs to be done, don't get me wrong. But there's been so much, like it's this whole EU, or not EU, sorry, the human lethargy where IPv4 works is known. And, you know, to the point where you kind of say, well, maybe we should pay 30 or 40 euros an IAP for IPv4 so that we can just continue using the old technology. Like I do slag off some of my friends, like there's Max Stuckey, he's a big IPv6 evangelist and wants people using it. And I'm just like, you know, and every time he mentions it in the BSD Packet Filter Labs, I'm like, oh yes, and here's an IPv6 example for the 6 people on the internet to use it. Now that's an incredibly ignorant comment to make.
Overly well, yeah.
But like a slight exaggeration, to be fair. Like there's only obviously 2 users on the internet using it. So, but like I would like to use it more. Like we have the core enabled. We just did advertise at the BGP. And one thing I would say to people is if you are doing IPv6, you need to manage the risks in it the same as you do IPv4. So don't turn it on for the sake of it. If you are turning it on, do it properly. Follow the best practice and commit resources to it. That's the thing. And just for small ISPs, it's not really there. Like I'm looking forward to people, like I've seen the debate about the Class E network 240.0.0/4 being,
yeah,
you know, the one that's reserved for future use, like maybe when, but they obviously don't want to use it for future use, even though we need it. So, notwithstanding the amount of operating systems that have hard codes as black hole routing for that particular subnet.
Yes, like, yeah, and that's the trouble. Is it's going to be a decade of hell that that we could go through to do that.
Do IPv6 instead.
Yeah, why don't we just solve the problem? Because yeah.
Do you not find it amusing though that they went with IPv6? Then they said, let's greenfield thinking and let's not learn from any of the mistakes we made on IPv4. You know, like repeating the same security issues in some cases and just stupid shit like that. That to me,
yeah, and you're deploying an entire new network stack is always going to be a hellscape. There's just it's going to happen. But the thing is, hey, shucks, we have way more network stack too in IPv6 to deploy. In some ways.
It opens up such possibilities that you can only dream of with IPv4. Like the whole, and that's one thing I do want. Like I actually, from a technology point of view, yes, I want to deploy IPv6. From a business point of view, I don't have to pay for it. But having said that, and I think that's where maybe the EU needs to probably help people along and saying, look, this is a good idea. And particularly for interoperating between applications and systems. And and in fairness, I would say probably the bigger cloud providers and the bigger ISPs have been better at doing the IPv6 adoption, and have been rolling it into their procurement process. Like, here's one of the practical issues is, if you have slightly lower cost CPEs, they won't have a dual stack. They won't support it. You'll need, and that is a problem. And then there's the training. But training is easily resolved. But it was just, there is a bit of a fear factor. Like, it was very hard to, you're talking about my best friends, on the board that I argue with every day, and that, you have to feel sorry for them. They work with me, like, for fuck's sake. But they see the benefit of IPv6, but they're also saying, look, there's a huge cost and risk, and we've enough of our own problems. So there's this barrier. But yeah, I think from a total thing about EU for cybersecurity, in terms of encryption and actually improving, like having endpoint to endpoint without NAT and all that type of crap. I think, and proper mobile communications that are rooted. I think there's possibility of IPv6 that we're missing out on, by not so. But there is the commercial imperative where it's like IP4 will do, but it's like, well, what do we need to do? Like,
my argument in the business case is that IPv4 is expensive, and getting more. It's come down recently. In the last year, it has come down. But do you want to buy a brand new car, or do you want to buy a /24? Is not quite there, but it's expensive. It's getting very, very expensive to own and operate IPv4. Which isn't a cost.
/22 would buy you a nice car.
Yeah, /22 would buy you a nice car. /24 would buy you a car, used. But and what about up north, Norway? What's IPv6 looking like as far as deployment?
Well, the biggest ISP Telenor has deployed it. Lyse, I think, is half of their network is ready. We are in the planning process, but using MikroTik's and hardware routing, it's not there yet on IPv6, so we'll probably have to think of something there. Also,
even with version 7 is I think V6 supports version 7 is better, or even with version 7 you're saying it's still not there, is it?
Well, you don't have fast forward in IPv6, so everything, all the packets just have to be routed, and then hardware offloading in the new version 7 stuff. You don't have as many routes that you can hardware offload in V6. Or if you're doing NAT or something else that eats up way more in V6.
It's one of those interesting problems, when you have the longest prefix match and you have all these people using /127s rather than actually just use the /64. So I'm wondering, has anyone done testing to see how much TCAM space you would actually use with /128?
RIPE recommends /56 for private customers and /48 for businesses.
Business. It's 4 times larger. It's 4 times larger.
Yeah. So what I meant was, that when you do the longest prefix match, instead of you're actually, if you have a load of 127 /127s, your prefix, you're actually going to the 100. Okay, fair enough, it's a red black 3 theoretically, but you're still actually going down another. First of all, you have to actually now distinguish between 127 bits of data for each one of your routes. I think I think there was some. I remember seeing a somewhere where someone was saying, just stick with /64 for your like like your whatever you call it, the for your
For your
actual
route table,
local
yeah.
for your actual
Your local
connected
connections,
routes.
yeah.
So your connected routes would be /64s as opposed to going all the way to because you're actually then having to differentiate with them. It can actually increase your use
I
of TCAM
believe
tables.
it could be that TCAMs that some people were doing compression, and like if they can knock off all the zeros, you can save yourself TCAM space. I don't believe that's a feature that MikroTik has implemented, because it's like it's not quite 4 times. It's like half. So like the space for that you can fit all the IPv6 or IPv4 routes, like 300,000, you can only get like 60 to 100,000. I'm pulling up the list right now, but it's not. You're not going to have it's not the same. All right, so let's see here. IPv4. So let's see, like their biggest and greatest, the 2216 IPv4 routes, you can have between 60 and 120K, and that's just depends on how long the route is.
And it's shared with
Yeah, and it's
V4.
shared, yeah,
With
with
the
V6. So V6 you can do 15 to 20K, so it is about a quarter of the size.
So it sounds a bit like the 432 is 128. Yeah, I suppose.
Yeah,
You're
you are.
you're chewing up the TCAM at 4 times the rate. Yeah.
Yeah, so they aren't doing any of that compression. If they were, that would be pretty baller, but I don't know how, like, they do have, but yeah, they don't have IPv6 fast track. Yeah. So
Like,
we're just waiting on, that's a negative. So Oli, do you see that fast track is a significant reduction in CPU utilization for you?
No, we are doing hardware routing, hardware accelerated routing.
Okay.
So we don't have any NAT. We are lucky enough to have more than enough IPv4 space, so we can provide all our clients with their own.
Yeah, you have like what, a /21?
We have 2/22s.
Okay.
we have a /21, a /22, and a /23.
Wow. Nice. I have a
No,
/24 all to my own.
Wow. No, but look,
that's a car.
Yeah.
what's really upsetting was when we set up, like I wanted to get it and I could have got a /18 or a /19. And they were giving them out like that. It's like, here you go.
Yeah.
But we couldn't afford it at the time. We were literally like, well, it was like, well, we need this or we build a base station so we can build more. So we chose a base station over /19. But it was the right decision, to be fair to my financial controllers, whose sole job is to stop me running the company to the ground. And thankfully, for 18 years straight, he has been successful. Long may that continue. But like I think it's like one of the things we use Aristas at our core. So we have the accelerated routing, and they use ALPM, this algorithm, along with prefix maps. So they do a bit of magic with that. But I do think the /127s is not really recommended for that reason, because you're actually having, particularly if you have lots of these connected routes, you have to populate these routes somehow into your TCAM. So, and that's the problem. So I think the /64 is a little bit better than it.
Yeah,
but,
and I think there's another reason, but for using 64s. And so I've always just defaulted to 64s.
It's
my point to points.
based the standard, like all the other stuff works out of the box as opposed to having to. So but yeah, like we found the Aristas, so at our core we would use that, and then obviously on our base stations we would use MikroTik, and they work quite well in that context of the base, the towers, router and stick with the XLAN encapsulation back to the Aristas, and then the Aristas are doing it, and they chew it for breakfast. It's worked really, really well, actually.
Okay. So now we're touching. We've touched on wireless equipment. We've touched a little bit on hardware. What is like the popular hardware? I mean, Cisco, like in like small medium business, I guess would be my question. And like large business, is Cisco like the dominant player, losing out to the Fortinets and the Aristas and Junipers of the world, or did you guys have other companies that flourished?
I think MikroTik is quite popular as a SME small business, particularly for CPs. They've lost ground in the wireless space certainly, but in terms of the routing, I like MikroTik routers are respectable routers. I'm not a massive fan of their switches, but that's probably PTSD from the early days of their switches, so maybe I'm being a bit
100 and 200 series, perhaps.
Yeah, 100, 200. I have PTSD and I've only did it for fun. I was like, VLAN config. No, you do straight bridge on 100 or 200s and don't do anything else because it's so painful. What about you, Oli? What's like the small medium business? Is it MikroTik really dominant and all over?
No, I don't see many people using MikroTik. We are some of the smaller service providers that use it, but clients use Ubiquiti because they like the ease of everything in a single pane of glass.
Yeah, I like it. Unifying the enterprise space is really popular, and we use it for managed service providers stuff. It's phenomenal.
Okay.
And it's reliable
for small networks.
For small networks, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
For your SME, if you have 8 to 10 switches on a network, they're tiny, perfect. So Unify, we would like the fixed wireless ISPs. You have a lot of edge switches, so you have the kind of your typical Broadcom based, and Nutanix is quite popular as well. So Nutanix edge switch, and then on the fixed wireless side, Cambium, Ubiquiti are probably the biggest players in Ireland. Then there's Radwin, and that's
Telrad. Are they popular at all out that way?
Radwin, they are Telrad.
Telrad.
Telrad. No, I haven't really come across much. Rad, the actual for the let's say the larger ISPs, yes, they would use them for their NTUs and stuff like that. And so the bigger guys would use Adva, but Nokia got the contract for the NBP, so Nokia will be the preferred partner. So Nokia, Alcatel, whatever. So some nice kit there. The GPON stuff, is 2.5, it's 10 gig based XGS PON.
Oh yeah. What's the GPON providers like? Are you guys all Nokia?
They're Nokia, and there's quite a bit of Huawei as well as the GPON provider.
You guys have not had. See, the United States, we had St. Patrick expel Huawei from our country. You have not had Patrick come.
It's a curious one, I would have to say that I find it amusing because the amount of intelligence agencies that have gotten up on other systems that have been Western based is quite,
We're totally okay with our stuff. We need to monitor you guys. Don't, but what about you?
I prefer Uncle Sam to Uncle She, or maybe I should be saying Uncle Olaf for in Germany or something. But no, I think the Western most intelligence services will try something, and they're investing in this offensive capability for a reason.
It's their job. Their job is to know.
I don't know.
I'm just making a joke about it. That Huawei's being the cost effective. I know down in the Philippines, Huawei is extremely popular.
Well, to be fair, but look, they have huge government subsidies. So there is There is a couple of things about Huawei you have to look. There is the transparency of the government side of stuff. The Chinese have their own questions to answer there. But the reality is, as one telecoms guy, he worked for a Chinese. It was a telephone exchange company, and he says their equipment was just phenomenal. And he says reason for it was that a small town in China was like 20 million people. Okay, because they had such population that the solutions they had to build for that had a certain scale that built it. But you do have these huge government subsidies, and there is the blurring between state and commerce. But that said, look, if you look at the United States objectively, you do have a blurring between the state and their companies as well, and your military spend, like, one of the things is it's not just on tanks, and it's actually on everything. You've got your Army Corps of Engineers, which maintain the levee in Lake Okeechobee, which actually helps agriculture there. So you've all this, and obviously it helps people live in Florida. Otherwise, we don't want those levees down. So your actual military budget is actually a civil. There's a huge civil or
infrastructure that goes into it,
and so you have massive investment in, and I would say almost subsidy for private enterprise in that private enterprise benefits from in America. So in a similar way, I suppose the reality is you can't trust if you don't see the open source. You can't necessarily trust the whole file, but you can put in mitigating measures. But I would say maybe Uncle Sam is a bit low for the top about Uncle Xi and Huawei. But Huawei do make good products, I would say that.
So here's my question. Are you building any fiber yourself, Tom?
We build fiber, but it's mainly point to point, so it's backhaul for our own stuff. So tower to tower, last
no
mile.
CPE focus, no customer focused fiber.
No, because just the cost, the return on capital for that, it's 20-year. We've grown out of cash flow. We've grown out of that. It's very so fiber doesn't allow us to do that.
So Ole, you guys are all fiber, correct?
Yeah, we have I think we have 14 customers left on DOCSIS 2 CFDSs.
Okay, so you guys have been shifting over, and your zone, correct? DOS zone.
Yeah.
Okay. What about in your backhaul switching stuff, or is that MikroTik?
MikroTik, and we also have one CTE switch.
Okay.
Which I can say that it's impossible to get updates for because it was after the Cisco sued them, so they made a specific operating system for just that switch, and then they shifted to something else later. So the SSH daemon in that has vulnerable protocols in it, and I think that's where the Chinese will probably have a look at that. That's an old one. We can break in using that if they want to.
Yeah. So. But I think is a lot of the controls is having built-in controls. Like I think the CCTV stuff is mad, like the amount of AI stuff that we're doing with that. And I do think we probably need to be a little bit more careful about how we send data to third countries. So when I say, it's funny, when we say Europe, third countries, it's third countries that are not, have we lost, Tom? I think we might have.
You're the host, it seems.
Oh dear, so finally taking over. It was like Matt Damon on Tonight Show. I'm taking over.
Late night show.
But I think he builds around it, but even with older telecom stuff, having all the admin stuff. Can the ZTE, do they support multiple routing domains that you can kind of put it out in its own? You have a management VRF versus versus, let's say, your internet VRF?
We don't use it for anything routing or anything, just as a switch. So
Yeah, I get you. So it's easy. So you're not actually
yeah,
exposing those.
no, it's not exposed to the internet at all. It would be lazily stupid to put it on the internet.
Absolutely.
It'd be like putting an XP on.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Like one of the things I love about the aristas that we use is that, they do support the VRFs. So you have
Yeah.
your management, and you just turn off all the management
Yeah.
just on VRF, and then the internet route. So
Yeah. Well, MicroTik has only hardware acceleration for one VRF. So if you use two, you can't use hardware acceleration. Also, if you use Q&Q, there's no hardware acceleration. So yeah, that's a bit naughty.
So wait. You can't do Q&Q hardware accelerated layer 2
on MicroTik.
Oh, I didn't know that. Huh, that sucks.
Yeah.
I guess that makes sense for the configuration. Well, so you can't do it in software, but I think you can do Q&Q by doing like the old classic. You just take a cable from one VLAN port and plug it into another one. You can do that. I know I've done that. I cheated. It's not doesn't count, but
you can't do it in hardware. Or you can do it in hardware, but then you need a beefy CPU to do it.
Okay.
Tom, do you mind me asking you a question? What way is the net neutrality debate or network fees debate in America? Like in Europe, they've revisited. It's been rejected every time they visit it. The telecoms are still pushing it. What way is it I believe that there was some talk of it in the FCC after the EU looked at it last year.
Yeah, so we're kind of the opposite of you guys. We had some issues, and then it was legislated that it wasn't ever legislated. It was the regulatory agency said, this is how, if you want to sell broadband, you have to have a statement of, whether you're network neutral or not, in which case you're not going to, and it's more focused on, in the United States, what were our frustration or the issue is that particular applications were being slowed down. And so we focus more on what type of application is our legal stuff. It's what I've seen. But it's kind of the two-prong argument. Is more your side of, can network operators charge the big companies for using. That has been is being made difficult and or not allowed to do. You can't do it. Yeah. And the prioritization of individual packets or applications, it's right now especially you can't do it.
Yeah,
you can't prioritize.
Presumably you're allowed to do a technical. So the way we had this open internet directive or regulation over it, so it's like you were. So obviously you're allowed to manage traffic to protect your network and protect quality. So for instance, VoIP packets should get a little bit better treatment than email packets, for instance. That if there's, in the event of unexpected congestion, drop your email packets, keep the voice packets flowing, kind of thing. And so we declare that, that's the only point. But we also say that we commit. So on our customer thing, we have on our code of practice, then on our terms and conditions, we actually have to list out what restrictions we do, if we any. And what we basically said is we do not obviously one of the concerns they had in I think in the US at one stage was where if a telco has a TV service that he would degrade, or sorry, not degrade, but they wouldn't invest in the connectivity required to deliver a competing TV service into their network. And that was obviously something that the Europeans didn't want to happen. And where is the network fees debate? So that's actually being closed off. So from a legislative point of view, they're saying no, that's not going to happen.
Yeah, and I would say that
Pause.
by and large, like just politically and network operators wise, like nobody and Google, Netflix, Facebook, such they have enough power and sway that ISPs just aren't going to. And honestly, there's just no one in the United States who really is like, oh, Comcast, they're honest. We love them. What they say is there's no one's going to say that. We don't have that by and large. I mean, there's some providers that have more social credit,
Mhm.
but by and large, no. Everyone, the bigger the ISP, the more people hate them.
No,
And
I think there's the thing of anyone who's ever gotten a roaming charge from telco understands what they mean by fair fees. Anyway,
yeah,
it's like, oh, well, you thought that roaming was fair, really, really? But like,
yeah,
yeah, it's one of those frustrating points for me. For us, is that it just keeps coming up. But I suppose they had look. I suppose if I was a big telco and we had, I would say, a guy who maybe understood their psyche or mentality at the top of the commission in that department, then you might try to get all this stuff pushed through. But it just keeps coming back. It's kind of annoying
yeah.
that.
Well,
But
and when I've talked to like guys who are running the big networks, and they're you know they're talking about moving terabits of traffic, and Steam up throws out an update for Call of Duty, and you go from a multiple terabit ports connectivity, you're in several internet exchanges, and then they're just start maxing out, and Steam then starts using will to deliver bandwidth to somewhere in California. They'll start sending traffic across the United States and back to users, and just getting hammered like that, like it's hard. It's not an easy situation, and there is some hey, invest in infrastructure, but Steam, Valve, Microsoft, they're all paying for infrastructure. They all have pretty open peering policies.
yeah,
If you need more bandwidth, they're gonna work to get it to you. Is the
absolutely.
frustration, I think, that a lot of people have. So
Certainly, like,
what about up in Norway, Ole? Is peering, and peering's obviously nobody really wants to do it because it's money out of your pocket. Um, but what about net neutrality and such? Is there any, or is this just more kind of tied closer, similar to what we're seeing in the EU in general?
I can't answer for the big guys, but probably there are talks between the big resource users and the ISPs, and they put caches where they can. So, like I said,
Mhm.
Google has a cache in our nearest city, and we have 2 millisecond ping time there. So we get good results for that stuff. YouTube in particular.
yeah,
So here, I guess maybe would technically wise, in the United States, if you're below 30, maybe 35, you're going to have heard about the net neutrality debate, and if you're at all techie, you're going to be like, oh, I want my internet to be net neutral. Above that, you're going to have fewer and fewer people be as interested. I've had some older customers be like, "Oh, hey, what is your policy?" But that's very, very uncommon and rare. Um, so, but there's certainly a knowledge about this, about net neutrality, and a desire. And I wouldn't. I think the influence of like 2 to 5% of my customers have I seen over the years be like, okay, because I can say that we are net neutral and we're not going to be messing around with your traffic. We don't care what you're doing. Your bandwidth, they're much more at least open to, it's a selling point for us. Would you guys say that ratio of customers you think would be, it's a selling point or a positive benefit that people are cognizant of it, and so therefore trying to make?
I don't think I've had any questions about that at all.
Okay.
I think it's kind of expected at this stage. I think, I'll give you an example. 10 years ago or 12 years ago, when Netflix entered the market, so if you have a demand-based investment strategy like we did, right? Everyone's used an average, let's say back 10 years ago, maybe 1 meg per subscriber peak time. And then suddenly they start, okay, well, that's maybe looking at the odd YouTube video, maybe, doing searches, sending emails, Facebook on. But then suddenly you have, okay, more video content. So you have Netflix makes, let's say, watching streaming much more popular. So there was a step change there at that point in time. But what was interesting was in that pain when they joined, but what happened was our user behavior changed. People said, right, we want to stream. And what actually happened in that situation was suddenly we were getting customers from the 4G networks, or sorry, the 3G networks back then, saying, we want to stream. Does your ISP support that if I get Netflix, it'll work? Does it? And they go, yeah. And they say, well, how do we know? And how can we trust you? You're tiny. And we go, well, look, you have 14-day, cooling off period. You have all that regulatory stuff. If we're not delivering the service, if it's not fit for service, then you can cancel. That's the law. What we actually found was, so the question wasn't that, oh, were you net neutral or anything like that, but it was like, does this service work? Or, so we'd have some businesses and they'd say, well, we've linked to, like what you said, Japan, but it was a link to the States. It was like, we're having some latency issues here with this one. And I was like, oh, okay. And then, we had to do some steering with like BGP, with local press and stuff, and ask another provider reciprocal on the other side to say, look, can you prefer this route? It seems to be better. So, so from that point of view, I think what actually then happened was it drove demand, because then people who were using Netflix on our service that was working well said, hey, this ISP seems to support it, it worked well, and it actually drove demand into us. But that was our experience. There was pain at the time, but that's because we were, I suppose, when you just invest ahead of demand, and then there's a jump in demand because of a behavior change, a significant behavior change, going from that, consuming TV just over satellite or free to air, and then say, no, I actually want to consume my TV through a streaming service. That's like, okay. And that's a huge habit change, But after that, and that was 10 years ago, and the reality is that I've picked up the customers because of that demand. So it was actually a specific request. Does this work? Well, but yeah, the cashless, I find, the internet exchanges, those are technological solutions that work well for our problem, for the problem of delivering to the customer. And it benefits both people. It benefits, when you hear it, it's like voting, like the Irish in America, vote early and vote often. Hear early and hear often. It's much better for the for everyone, like for your customer and for the streaming service or the content providers service.
Yeah.
As well.
Okay. Well, I think we've kind of gotten through a good portion of our topics. Ole, did you run into anything else that you were like, oh, hey, this is like something that I want to mention or drag everyone through?
No, not really.
Okay. Yeah, I did see there's somebody was posting on WISP Talk about how they just got you went to the grocery store and bought 300 meg fiber internet for $30 a month. It's like, God, I just saw that while Tom was talking about it. Well, that's the race to the bottom is still going. All right, well, Tom, any other things that you wanted to nail on?
Just for the European and my Norwegian friend, because he can actually contribute to the white paper as well, consultation. So this is mainly for the European ISPs, I would say this, but also the American ISPs and American equipment manufacturer. The European white paper, it's a consultation that's been out since February. It's closing on the 30th of June, so I would say contribute early, contribute often. You can contact me, tom.smith@wirelessconnect.eu, if you have any questions about it. But it's a European have your say, and just look up the white paper. I'll send the link to Tom, and he'll put it in under the YouTube description. But certainly I would be asking small ISPs particularly, because I think that your future is, I think if you let the bigger guys away with it, I think they're going to continue to try and tilt the deck in their favor. And I think what we do as small ISPs matter. And, and the best type of competition is infrastructure competition. And that's what we do, that's what we're different. And there's actually about 150,000 small subscribers in Ireland served on fixed wireless. So that's mainly rural, and that's if you multiply that out by 5,500 per customer for fiber, that's an awful lot of taxpayers' dollar being spent to overbuild it. So it's just something to bear in mind what you do. And if you're continuously invested in your infrastructure, you should be recognised to that, or at least compensated. Because look, it's a cool political goal to make everyone gigabit. No one disputes that. But the guys who actually carried us this far, and through no fault of their own, are being overbuilt. There needs to be compensation for that.
Yep. All right. Well,
I'll get off my soapbox.
Thanks, Tom. All right, Ole. If people are out on the internet and they want to get a hold of you, what should they do?
Well, they should, of course, join the Little Brothers Slack group.
Yeah.
Throw a little bone our way and get access to a lot of great people and resources.
Yep. Definitely join the Slack group. Lots of fun, good stuff. It's a few bucks a month on Patreon, and we'll get you in. And good guys, good conversations, and always lots of help. And we've got a bunch of lurkers, but we have guys like you contributing all the time. Every once in a while, we have the Tom Smiths who jump in, advertise their BSD talk to oblivion, and then disappear into the ethers. So I'll call you out on that, Tom.
Hold on, I hope that BSD went well. Is awesome.
It is awesome.
We'll do another talk. We'll do another podcast.
We'll do another cast sometime on that.
Just nearly pushed it to 3 hours there. You're lucky. Yes. I'm going to be restrained now. I'm not going to talk about network channel and how awesome it is on OpenBSD and how everyone should check it out.
All right, definitely send me links. Check out the links below, guys. And T. Krogan Tommy at Lost Creek, that still works. Or the Brothers Wisp at gmail.com. Check us out. I did make it so that we are on all sorts of platforms. I was like, we're on Spotify totally a few weeks ago, and found out that we weren't. So we're on everything. We're distributing. I've made certain, if there's a platform out there that we are not on, let me know. And while I still have all that stuff stuck in my brain, I'll get us on there. So take care, everybody. Have a nice day. Take care.
Peace out, guys.
Peace out. We're in.
Space on this mothership, wireless networking. We talk about equipment and methodology, so sit back and start learning. Lighting up the tower so people can start searching. Shooting up the web in neighborhoods, net surfing. We got horrible jokes, we're loud and annoying, but we're informative facts, we're not disappointing. Just give us a listen, cause fun is the mission. I'm telling you, you don't know what you are missing. Ideas and some good comedy given. If you missed the show already, don't worry, you're forgiven.